gave to their cook Chandan. And as we know, he knew his drink too. A whiskey man, he later favoured the single malt. So this lit fest, in keeping with spreading the joy of learning through books, videos, food, personal experiences and stories, now brings you the F word and the B word. A session on food and booze, not on what you thought. Tara is an actress and MTV VJ, food writer and photographer, and the author of 3 books. Her latest, An Indian Sense of Salad, Eat Raw, Eat More, deconstructs classic Indian dishes to their raw form to prepare easy, fresh recipes packed with flavor. Desmond Nazareth is the principal founder and MD of Agave India, India's first and only rurally based greenfield, field-to-bottle and forest-to-bottle craft distillery using Indian know-how and raw materials. By the way, Desmond's distillers are all women. How's that for the rise of women in the age of #MeToo? Wendell, as we all know is a designer of international acclaim, but how does he juggle his love of food and cooking in a sphere where models and designers are reluctant to eat at all? According to him, food is a meal and cuisine is a wide range of experience. So we look forward to a gastronomic delight through this discussion on food and booze, the F word and the B word.
Good evening, everyone. It is our pleasure to be here, and we are going to make you hungry and thirsty because we are going to talk about food and drink. And I think the bar's already been set up, so we'll run straight into the heart of the matter. But before I start off, I'd just like to say I got roped into this because somebody got dropped out. And I was very happy to be roped into it because of the fact that all 3 of us come from the Konkan coast, which has now disappeared. And Tara comes from Maharashtra, I come from Goa, and Desmond comes from Mangalore. Am I right? And we all belong to one coast. And the second thing is that all of us are big career jumpers. I jumped from dressing salads to dressing women, from catering college into a fashion college. Tara did the reverse and went from glamour into food. And Desmond, when I first met him, he was doing a documentary on Goa, and now he's distilling alcohol. So this is a very heady mix on this panel. I just want to ask her straight away, what does, I just want to ask you, we have a small video to show which Desmond has, so that I think that we'll base the questions on that video. But before I go into that, I want to ask you, what actually made you write your book and what made you get into your agave plant?
Okay, so I was living outside of India for many years, about 18 years, and I came back to India with a reputation for making cocktails, but as an amateur. And when I landed up in Bombay, I couldn't find some of the basic ingredients for some of the cocktails I like, margaritas in particular. So I was curious about it. I'm curious about things. I started asking, why is there just one country in the world make tequila when everything else that I could think of is made by multiple countries, multiple producers? So I started researching it and quickly found on the internet pictures of agave plants in Mexico, which I said, I've seen these plants in India when I was a child growing up and traveling around the country. And that led to a 18-year journey which has brought me here today, wherein the research for 4 years was followed by finding the plant in an exciting story that is told in the newspapers now, and then developing this agave spirit, comparing it to the Mexican stuff that I was getting from the US, and finding that I was making agave spirits in India at an international quality. So that made me start a plant called a craft distillery, wherein I make 3 different spirits now: agave spirits, cane spirits like the Brazilian cachaça, and most recently, and the most exciting, rural India, rural central India, tribal India's mahua.
my grandmother was an excellent cook, and so was her mother, and she left me all her old handwritten cookbooks, and they're almost like 100 years old, and they were falling apart, and I decided that I would basically copy them to Word so that I could preserve the recipes. But as I started doing that, I discovered that they had a life of their own, and that studying how my great-grandmother cooked and how my grandmother cooked and how they moved up and down from different cities in the Konkan coast and how their lives changed told me a lot about the history of people in that region. And I became very interested in food history, not as much just recipes, but the fact that if you look at a family and how they cook, you look at a recipe, you can kind of tell what happened in that period of time. And I began to become very interested in food in India being so deeply connected to people's religion, their caste, their community, how they pray, how they live. And I sort of got into the journey of trying to catalog India's culinary heritage, one region at a time.
Wow. Can we play his video right now? So
The reason I'd like this video to be played is that most people now are in cities are familiar with craft breweries and with standard distilleries that make IMFLs and so on. But a craft distillery, which is something that I started India's first, is something you may not have an image or a picture about. So what I wanted to show is the drone fly-through in 3 minutes, wherein you'll see the making of agave spirit, which is something similar to what's done in Mexico, but it's the same distillery in which we also make the cane spirit and now mahua.
Desmond, where are the women who are supposed to be working there?
Actually, that's a misconstrued thing. All the mahua distillers that I've met are all women. So and this is just about agave.
Okay.
The Mexican women are in Mexico.
Okay.
What castes were those?
Those were charred oak castes. Yeah.
And they come from this north part of India?
No. The castes are not from India. In
Okay.
fact, we haven't released the cask age product yet. It's going to be
Okay.
released soon. But
So is mahua protected?
Mahua.
I mean, does it have an appellation?
No,
of origin
Mahua does not have an appellation of origin. It's actually been traditionally considered a country liquor. It's made in the biggest, in 13 different states in India by tribal populations. It's been suppressed by the British government initially, and then the Indian government has followed suit. I have made a breakthrough in that I have taken it from the level of a country spirit and now made it at an international quality, to the extent that it's being written about as a potential national spirit of India. And I'm trying to spearhead that movement along with a whole bunch of other heritage alcohol of India.
It's a flower, right?
It's a sweet flower that drops from the tree, Mahua trees in these central Indian forests all the way from Rajasthan, Gujarat to West Bengal, sweeping all the way to the central belt. And it is the only distilled spirit in the world made from a sweet flower. So it's an extraordinary opportunity for India to create something of what could be construed national and then get a GI for it, which is what you were asking.
So on what grounds would you get a GI?
The grounds would be very simple. You first of all have something unique to India, unique to a geographic region. 90% of all the Mahua in the world comes out of India. There's probably a few trees in Pakistan and Bangladesh, Myanmar and so on, Sri Lanka, but the bulk of it is here. Over 100,000 tons of Mahua is collected by tribals every year. And it's deeply rooted in tribal culture to the extent of having been around for hundreds of years, generated a lot of folklore, wonderful folk tales that are part of the heritage that Bhils and Gonds and Santals pass down the generations. It's a part of every major function in the tribal world, but it is so sad to see how it is suppressed, meaning it's done surreptitiously. And so now what I've done is put it in the limelight and I'm offering it to the world. So it's being written about abroad as well. In fact, in today's Mint Lounge, there's a cover story on Mahua. And people are going, journalists are going out to meet people in the forests to meet and see what's going on and reporting on it. So hopefully there'll be change.
I think the guy who did the GI for Feni in Goa, the Vaz family, right?
Yeah.
They should be able to help you get it because they got it quite quick.
Yeah, in fact, I've learned a lot from what they did about what not to do.
It's from Mac. Do you want to tell us about your book, Tara, your new book? Because I know the old book is a great book. Since my next book is going to be on the Konkan coast. Yes, because I wrote about Goa. I'm opening a museum based on my first book. But my next book is going to be a children's book because Postcan was classified for adult reading. So I said the next one I'm doing a children's coloring book, which is in cartoon format.
Oh, wonderful.
So they can color it like an Asterix comic. So tell us about your new book.
Well, you know, it sort of came from a basic, when I came back from the United States, one of the things that I missed eating a lot was salads, because in Indian cuisine we don't eat a lot of food raw. You know, we cook and overcook everything, and we don't have a tradition other than maybe the odd raita or pushambris, or you know, we don't really have a tradition with salads. And I started wondering, why is that? Because our culinary heritage is so old, it's so diverse, it's so complex. And so I started reading translated texts of the Ayurveda, and you sort of get the sense that anything that was raw was either meant for you to eat because you were sick. You know, jari booties and stuff are ground up and things are eaten raw, or because you were very poor. And then I started to find parallels for it in the cooking of medieval Europe, for instance. And so I started saying, how can we cook salads with what's available in India? How can we eat more raw food? And then it struck me that, you know, take a recipe like sarson da saag. I'm sure everyone here knows roughly what goes into it, right? The core basis of Indian food is what we do with our spices. You know, it's like a chessboard. You make 10 moves and you create a different game. Similarly, you put 20 spices together and you change just one little quantity and you have a completely different recipe. That's our forte. That we take spices that exist and then create a flavor that doesn't exist, which is quite different, for instance, from the way the Italians cook. So I thought, if these spices have worked for thousands of years or hundreds of years in their cooked form, why can't they also work in their raw form? So what I started to do was I started to deconstruct classic Indian vegetarian recipes and take the exact same ingredients and use them in a salad, which then more or less recreates the flavor as it is cooked. So I have, for instance, a recipe called the undio salad or the dhansak salad. It sounds strange, but if you start, it sounds strange, but if you start breaking the ingredients down and putting those flavors together, you'll find that whether it's in its cooked form or its raw form, it works. And the secret to that is that we, in a sense, largely invented umami. You know, our spices, coupled with oil and fat and acid, have created flavors that don't exist anywhere else. So if they work in the cooked form, why can't they work in the raw form?
So if you tell me that you can make a Goan prawn curry salad, actually I just faint right now.
That's fine.
That's not there.
No, okay. I left that out.
Okay. In this world that moves so quickly, I always said that, you know, in my last book, Poske, I put in 22 recipes into the story and built them around these characters, these 4 characters in the book. But I always felt that if I wrote a cooking book, my cooking book would be about how to cook quickly, because people have no time to cook these days. They come back from work, and I'm sure you all agree, and then you can't sit and make a vindaloo, for God's sake, because that takes so many hours of grinding and cutting and chopping and whatever. So what is your like quickest recipes? Give them a secret. If not from the book, something. Okay, I can tell you mine and then you get an idea. So we all know how to make a hummus, right? You just boil the chickpeas and then you grind them with a little bit of tahina and lime juice and put a little bit of chili powder in it and some olive oil. But what I do in my house is I skip the olive oil, I make the hummus and I keep it cold in the fridge, and then I take half a Goan sausage and I chop it up fine, put it in a pan and sweat out the fat until the sausage is cooked, and then I pour that hot thing on top of the cold hummus and serve it with our poi bread that has been toasted, and everyone says, wow, this tastes so good. Because so what is your like creative? Give us one thing.
You know, it's funny you should say that about quick cooking, but I've actually started moving towards cooking that takes a longer period of time, because I just feel that it's nice to go back to the old ways and not lose those recipes entirely. But as we're becoming, you know, we're a country where we've always had cooks. We've had people to do the work for us, so it didn't matter how long it took them, you know, we'd eat very complex recipes. But you're right, now that's becoming less and less common, so we want to cook.
No, it's not getting less and less common. My partner will completely agree with you. Okay. His idea of cooking is to like cook something that takes 3 hours in the oven, and until the, you know, when you're making like a duck cassoulet, he'll wait till the duck completely disappears and melts and you don't see it. That takes about 4 hours.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So you have to give us your recipe.
I'd say my grandmother's chili scrambled eggs. Where you brown the butter, you cook the chilies in it, and then you slow cook the eggs until they're really creamy and soft, and they're sort of like just like a custard. And then you put them on gutli pav that's been grilled with butter in the.
Oof.
It's delicious.
It sounds like a cholesterol attack. Do you want to give a recipe?
Sure.
Because I've tasted your cocktail.
With mahua.
A quick recipe.
With mahua, or shall I tell you it takes a week to make anything that I do?
No. I've seen you whip up something really fast at the last book launch that we did.
Field to bottle, forest to bottle guy. It takes a long time to get the stuff and.
No. Once you've got it distilled, then what happens?
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. So I'm interested in the recipes for making my
What
spirits.
about a cocktail?
Cocktails with mahua. The simplest and most beautiful recipe is to just do a gin and tonic, except instead of the gin, put mahua.
Oh.
And it's superb. It's like a summery drink that's great.
Is that the mahua that has the spices in it?
No, the plain mahua. You could also do it with the spice, but that was already too sweet.
Okay.
It's a honey and spice based liqueur.
Okay.
With on a mahua spirit base.
But do you add anything else? I mean, like gin is one of the most complex liqueurs. It's got so many combinations.
That's a finished product. Yeah. My mahua is a finished product. So you just add, instead of gin, you use mahua. Yeah.
So very quickly, can you tell us what apart from the actual distillery process, I like what you do with your bottling and your packaging, because you know today presentation is everything, with food as well, and it's kind of become like fashion. It's all styled and it's all presented. Even I've gone to friends' houses who like don't cook, but when they cook, they want to present it beautifully. And you've done great thing with your bottle. It looks like a half bottle, right?
So here's where the women's story comes. The bottle was designed by a woman designer in Goa, Our craft distillery was designed by a woman architect in Goa. They were first time bottle designers, first time distillery designers. So, and our labels were designed by a woman who's also based in Goa, but all with the connections outside Goa.
So how important is it for it to stand out compared to what other
very
bottles?
important. So for me, I believe the success of my brand, it has gone through word of mouth mainly, is because we first of all make world-class product, and we are competing with with people abroad now. We are exporting to Europe and the US, but world-class product in designer bottles,
Yeah.
backed by a good brand story at affordable rates for Indian is my recipe. Hey, that's a recipe.
What's your idea about this whole decoration and the balance of color and texture and apart from the taste and the presentation?
Well, it can be good fusion or confusion. It depends on who's doing it. But I mean, I was asked this question at another panel about molecular gastronomy and whether it's really going to survive. I think everything has its place, but eventually it's got to taste good. Eventually, no matter how good it looks, if you don't feel like eating it again and again, I don't think it's really worked.
No, but I'm saying in your salad, don't you have to have that combination of different textures in the salad?
Well, with raw food, it's actually much easier because nature's produce is so beautiful anyway. A raw tomato is much more beautiful than when you pulped it down and cooked it into a masala. So with salads it is easy, and presentation of course is very important. You have tossed presentations, you have salads in glasses, in cups, and one of the really good ways to sort of keep your palate interested is in serving the same thing in different ways and changing the way it looks all the time, because you eat with your eyes first, not with your mouth. So yeah, presentation is very important.
So we have to lighten things up, and tell a funny thing about your story or your book or your factory. I'll tell you mine. When I started doing eco-friendly garments in 1993, when I moved to Goa, I was like so crazy about doing this eco-friendly before it was a word in the fashion lexicon in India. So I said we wove this pineapple in silk, and we wove banana in silk, the fibers, and then we wore different things. And I said we should try to make rice or wheat stalks and cotton, and we wove it, and it all went beautifully until the other two we dyed, and like it came out really lustrous and nice. When we went to dye this wheat and cotton, it just turned into a big lump of atta. So it had to be chucked out. Yeah. So anything like that in your cooking where it's like boomerang completely on you?
Oh, so many times. I mean, it's embarrassing, but in this process of deconstructing and recipes, you have to try so many different variations, and you can really mess up an undio salad. It can turn into like really something horrible. so yeah, it has happened to me many times. What about you?
Okay, my story concerns these big fat stems that you saw in the video. People in India, the authorities were looking at something new. They said, what the heck is this agave trying to make a spirit out of? And is it a fruit? I said, no, this is authorities. So how is it a vegetable? I said, no, it's not a vegetable. So what is it, an Ayurvedic substance? And so they wanted me to get an Ayurvedic license because it was neither a fruit nor a vegetable. And I said, Ayurveda and what I'm doing, forget about it.
Somaras.
Yeah, because it looks like a giant pineapple. I could
Yeah, what is it? Is that the root of the plant?
It's the stem of the plant.
Stem.
Yeah. But I've had absolutely absurd questions from authorities about everything I do. Because nobody else is doing it.
That's because we creative people are all weird, and they know that we're weird. So they ask us weird. So it's time for some weird questions from you all, please. We have 2.5 minutes. Mr. Rahul, need the mic. Okay. Yeah. Sir, what I want to ask about, don't ask me about girls.
Are there any fruits that is for Tara, any fruits or vegetables which you find only in India?
Yeah, I mean, so many. When you actually start breaking down recipes, you're able to sort of create you know, the ones that came after the Portuguese and the ones that came before the Portuguese. So for instance, cumin, I mean, I'm now talking spices, but I'll also tell you. So eggplant is native to India, mango is native to India, but the cashew is not native to India. Cumin is native to India. You know, if you look at a recipe like varan dal, do you know what varan is?
Yes.
Okay. So it's what we call a sattvic recipe because it has no onions, no garlic, and no ginger either. So if you look at that recipe, tur dal is native to the subcontinent, jeera is native to the subcontinent. Asafoetida, it's believed that, you know, the Greeks or the Persians were not quite clear, brought it to India. Haldi is native to India. So it's a kind of recipe that occurred before any form of colonization. But if you look at a vindaloo, for instance, we know it has Portuguese influence for various reasons, you know, the use of vinegar, the name itself. Potatoes are not native to India. Tomatoes are not native to India. Chilies are not native to India. You have a very interesting story about chilies. Pineapple is not native to India. These days we like to say that everything was made here and everything is from here, but a lot isn't. Chickus are native, no? No, they're not?
Brazil. Came from Brazil.
Yeah. Now oranges are native to India. In fact, the wild oranges are endemic in the northeast of India. And interestingly, you'll find that a lot of the ingredients used in northeastern India are also used in Korean, Japanese, and Thai cuisine.
I'll just add one thing to that. Anybody interested in this subject of what's native to India and or old world, new world should look up Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is what happened after Columbus and Vasco da Gama did their seafaring, the discovery of the New World. So a whole lot of things from the New World moved to the Old World and vice versa. Literally, the list goes on into tens of fruits, vegetables, and other things.
It was not just the New World and the Old World, it was the fact that the Portuguese took both sides of our subcontinent and bought things from China and Japan and all the Spice Islands and whatever, and from the other side as well. So our time's up and we are good children, we stick to the time and we're leaving. Okay. Good night.
Thank you.
And bon appetit. And Sante.